When I first met Dawn had been dealing with diarrhea, stomach pain, bloating, acid reflux, fatigue, and insomnia for over 40 years. The depth and intensity of his symptoms cannot be exaggerated. Before our first conversation together, Dawn wrote to me that his stomach pain and diarrhea was sometimes so bad that he'd pass out in the bathroom only to wake up on the floor sweating and weak, then sleep on the floor near the bathroom just out of fatigue. His goal in working together through our Better Belly Blueprint program was to be able to travel. As a recent retiree and new grandfather, Don's only goal was to be able to finally participate in vacations and travel with his family and new grandchildren like he hadn't been able to do throughout his 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. On today's episode, you are in for a treat. As a recent graduate of the Better Belly Blueprint program, Don has agreed to come onto the podcast and share his rags to riches version of healing his body through our program, the Better Belly Blueprint. And this worked for him even when nothing had worked for him in the prior 40 years of his life, and after working with dozens of the best GI doctors in the country. Whether or not your symptoms are exactly the same type or intensity of Dawn's, I hope you find encouragement and hope from today's episode. Because if Dawn can heal after 40 years of medications, pain, and being told by GI docs there was nothing he could do, then you can too. Hey friend, welcome to the Better Belly Podcast. If you're currently trying endless supplements, doctor visits, and diet changes to heal your mystery symptoms, you are in the right place. We're here to solve the real root causes behind your gut, hormone, skin, sleep, and brain concerns. Literally anything and everything in your body. My name is Allison Jordan. I'm a functional medicine practitioner that has supported over 150 clients just like you to heal problems that no one has been able to fix. You don't need a perfect diet or a random supplement you found on Instagram to heal. You need a proven system that heals your whole body from the inside out. That's what I'm here to share with you, episode by episode. It's time to make health easy again. And just as a reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own health practitioner before you make any changes to your health.
But listen, there's something that I need to say here quick before we get into all of this, just so you know.
Yeah.
You're my hero.
Aww.
And now listen, I know you don't understand that, and you can't understand it unless you know what my journey has been. But just trust me, you're my hero.
Aw. Well, I mean, that's what today is all about no, okay, maybe that came out wrong. It's not about how awesome I am, but just like telling your story. That is, and today I'm hoping that I'll hear some things maybe that I already know and that other people can learn for the first time. I will probably learn some new things today. But just to that's what people need. That's what we need in this world of like, even for you, you know firsthand what it's like to go through life and not know what to do in your health and not know who to trust and not
Right.
and not know. And we just need these stories that are both just generally hope giving, like, oh wow, things can change, and like maybe can point people to the right next solution for them. So I mean, I know I get it. So well, Dawn, thank you so much for just coming and sharing. You've been really honest with me in your health journey. And I actually looked back to the very first time we communicated. Dawn, this is exciting. I don't know if you realize this. The very first time you sent me a message, it was October 23rd, 2023. It's like almost a year ago to date of recording this podcast episode.
Yeah, I remember.
I mean, yeah. So you sent me this message and could just really tell like you thought really clearly about your health. You didn't want to just jump into things. You were intrigued with some of the things that you'd found on the podcast and you just had some questions for me. And so we chatted from October, and then by I think like a month-ish later, you joined the Better Belly Blueprint. And I would just love for you to tell the listeners, catch them up before you started working with us with Better Belly Therapies and going through the Better Belly Blueprint. What was going on in your health? What led you to us?
Well, I had suffered with health issues since the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And things really went bad in the mid 80s, I think, is when I really started. Looking back now, I know it was Crohn's issues, but I didn't know that at the time. And it actually took 25 years before I actually got a diagnosis of Crohn's. And I suffered the whole time with excruciating abdominal pains at times that left me completely, totally disabled with those. But I was having issues with that, but also I had a lot of acid reflux. I was obese, a lot of fatigue, um, abdominal cramping, a lot of bloating. But the cramping was probably the most consistent thing. I was dealing with abdominal cramping all the time, and many times at night I would sleep with a heating pad on my stomach, just seeking some kind of relief.
Yeah. How old were you in the 80s? Do you remember like what decade? Like 20s, 30s,
I
40s,
would have been in my 30s,
30s? Okay.
early 30s.
Okay. So, way back in the 80s, I'll say before I was born, before some of our listeners were born, maybe that feels like the right timeline for some of our listeners. Like, yep, that was me. But in the 80s, when you were in your 30s, you started getting some severe stuff. No one even knew it was Crohn's. Tell some like highlights over what happened over the next few decades of, what were things you tried in your health? I know you got your Crohn's diagnosis, which I know wasn't even like necessarily like the big win, although it probably like I know there was some relief involved in that diagnosis, but just yeah, some highlights of was your health going up? Was it going down? What happened over the next few decades?
Well, it's interesting. It had been a slow decline, and the body seems to adapt, and you kind of deal with things as they come, and you just adapt to that new normal. So it was a slow deterioration, I think. In the 80s, the first thing that I really started having issues with was the acid reflux. It got so bad that I was having trouble swallowing, and I had to go in and have a procedure where they stretched my throat out
Yeah,
so that I
I've
could
had a couple
swallow.
clients have that. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
realize you were one of those.
yeah, totally painless. But at that point, they put me on omeprazole, and I was on omeprazole. I've been on omeprazole till I started Better Belly Blueprint. So,
Yeah, I know.
um,
We'll get into that.
yeah, yeah. But it was chronic decline. I had a lot of colonoscopies trying to figure out stomach issues, and then in the 90s, I began my career that I ended up retiring from, and that was a bit of a stressor there, but I was still active and was still able to take a lot of family trips and things of that nature. But the health issues kept getting worse, and in fact, um, I got to the point where I was having bad diarrhea, and it was chronic, but sometimes it was really urgent. So I needed to use a bathroom right away. And so as time went on, even into the 2000s, I still could get no answers from doctors what was causing this, what was giving me all this issue. And of course, the travel and stuff kind of ceased. And my wife and kids, we didn't really take that many trips any longer. Um, and then in the 2000s, it just continued. It was just more of the same, just a slow degradation of health. Um, 2010s when things really started to get really bad. I started getting the really severe um, stomach cramping at that time. I've had episodes at that time where literally I was too weak to go from the bathroom to the bed, and a lot of times my wife would just give me a pillow and a blanket, and I would have to sleep for a couple hours on the floor till I got enough strength and I could get up and go to bed. And a lot of times after those episodes, I would sleep for 12 hours or more.
Mm.
I was just completely wiped out from the whole incident. But I kept trying different doctors, and I probably have seen maybe six different GI doctors trying to find an answer. Even went to the world renowned hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, and spoke to someone I was told was one of the leading experts on inflammatory bowel diseases. Um, I had numerous colonoscopies prior to that, but of course they wanted a new one, so I had a colonoscopy down there, and that
It's
was
it's what they think is they're like, this is what we can do for you. You just gotta do it.
right. And the thing it was a waste of trip because
Yes.
he he
Yes.
he even this gentleman didn't identify my Crohn's. And so I kept going back to my
This
primary
is in the
care physician.
2010s, right?
That was in the
20.
2010s. Yep.
Ooh, ooh,
I would
spicy.
go back to my primary care doctor and, what do I do now? Who do I see now? Where do I go? And he finally said, well, there's a new physician in town. He's a doctor, a PhD, MD. And he does a lot of
Whoa.
research. Yeah, so he does a lot of research. So he said, I'll send you to him. You probably won't get to see him at first, but you can try him. Well, when I went to that practice, I actually saw one of his colleagues there who had just come out of 5 months of retirement. He said, I just retired 5 months ago. I'm back because I just can't stand doing nothing. And I feel better helping people. So he was actually the one that discovered the Crohn's for me. He had me swallow one of those capsule cameras that took pictures all the way through the digestive tract.
Good.
And I got a call from him like a day later, and he asked me if the next day I could come into the office. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is cancer of some type.
Right, right. He's like, come in now.
Yeah. So I went in to see him, and he said, I've discovered what your problem is. And he showed me pictures of my small intestine, and it was just riddled with ulcers, and one that was 3 feet in length.
Oh my gosh. Oh
And
my gosh. It's like
he,
the size of a child. The
yep,
length of a child, at least.
yep. So he told me that at that point, that the reason that I was having such severe stomach pain when I would get those episodes is because when the intestines get triggered or inflamed, they swell, but they swell shut. So nothing could pass. And of course,
Oh,
the peristalsis was kind of trying to push everything
do its
through.
job.
Yep.
Yeah.
And nothing could move. And so I was getting terrible pain. So I lived like that up through 2018. And in 2018, I was introduced to a pair of natural supplements that I started taking. And within 6 months, I started feeling better. And I had a colonoscopy in 2019. And I should say in 2017, I had a colonoscopy prior to starting this. And it showed that the Crohn's had spread into my large intestine.
Mm.
And by 2019, after I'd been on these products for a year, it had gone into remission. There was no more Crohn's in the in the large intestine. And so I was doing okay, but even with the treatment that they were giving me, I was still having the bad bloating, diarrhea, cramping, and I couldn't seem to get over the hump. So I kept looking online because they wanted to put me on Humira, one of the biologic drugs, and I was afraid to go on those with all the side effects. I told them I felt bad enough with just the Crohn's. I didn't need all those other side effects. So I refused to take it. And so I started doing research on the internet, trying to find something that might help. So I've tried all kinds of potions and supplements and probiotics, and none of it ever worked. None of it
I
ever
know
worked. I
it's so
tried everything.
depressing.
Yeah, I tried everything. And so that brings us up to the 2020s. Um, I should say also that during the 2010s, my job moved, the office relocated. So my commute went from 15 minutes to 75 minutes, which that became a real issue with work because of the long commute, needing to have facilities nearby just in case. So that became a problem. But then my job duties changed, and I had to go out on the road and serve a 3-county area 2 days a week. So I would load up on like a Imodium and try to go out on the road.
Don.
And of course, the Imodium would mess me up for the next couple of days. Then
Yeah, right.
I would be all messed up. So then in the 2020s, COVID hit, and I got to work from home, and I stayed working from home. And of course, I didn't have to make the visits during the week like I used to. And when it got time for us to start going back out on the road again, I already was beyond 2 years beyond my retirement age. So I decided to just retire rather than go back to that again. So I remember going to see my current GI doc, and I asked him about the COVID vaccine. And I said, I've read different things about it. I said, I'm a little reluctant to get it because I said, I've read that it could affect, and stir up autoimmune diseases again. And I said, I'll be honest, I'm concerned. And, what do you think? And they said, well, there's really no guarantee. And I said, well, you know what, doc, I'd really rather get COVID and die of COVID than have to go back to having those stomach cramps again. So I think I'm going to pass on that vaccine. But then I retired and thinking that, well, now I can just devote some time to my health. And I tried different things. And I just never could get over the hump. Stumbled across the your podcast, Better Belly podcasts, and started listening to those. And I thought, this is something totally different. This is something that I haven't ever heard before. No one's ever mentioned to me before. I'm going to give this a try, and here we are. So I decided to jump in November of 23 and started with all the testing and actually began protocols in January
Yeah, I
of this
mean,
year.
whew, I mean, just even hearing that, it is such, I get so many feels, partly because it's such a common story. It's maybe different symptoms, it's different things people have tried, but it's also super similar. There's lots of colonoscopies and endoscopies when there's GI symptoms involved. There's
Right.
lots of lack of diagnoses, misdiagnoses, diagnoses that still don't resolve the issue. And then like the things you stumble across that then help you manage the best. So maybe some people it's a diet change, some people it's a supplement their naturopath found for them. You found these two natural supplements that help put you into Crohn's remission, which you told me when you joined, you're like, I'm in remission in my Crohn's, but I don't feel good.
Right.
And acid reflux was one of a big focus of yours. But I would love to hear you catch our listeners up when you joined the program November of 2023. Now that they kind of have a sense of just the history, what was going on, what in your mind were your top 5 symptoms that you're like, man, if I could get rid of these suckers, this is what I want to get rid of?
Well, obviously the acid reflux was one of those issues. The bloating, the abdominal cramping, which was constant,
Mm,
and that diarrhea. I just couldn't go anywhere. I mean, it was to the point where when I would go to visit friends, they knew that we had to visit and then eat, and then I would immediately leave after eating because I just never knew.
wow.
I might be an overnight guest if I didn't. So
Yeah.
those were the things that were really I was trying to get some kind of help with.
Yeah. Yeah, you wrote to me that you were like I'm just looking at a message that again, I was so touched. I mean, and people are usually pretty honest with me and open about stuff, but I could just feel your earnestness and I could feel your intentionality when you wrote about like you were excluded from family trips for many, many years and you lost spending vacations with your kids and you made it to retirement and you didn't want that happening with your granddaughters. I'm like, hope you don't mind. I'm like kind of reading or summarizing a
It's
Facebook
fine.
message. Um, and I was like, we can work with this. Um, I kind of like sharing the wins really close to the beginning, and then we're gonna do some backtracking on what the process was like. But I would love for you to share. I actually have, Facebook posts that things that you've shared with me, but share with our listeners. What are your symptoms like now? Like what happened to those 5 symptoms: the bloating, the acid reflux, the diarrhea, you know, I'll even say like you were a little concerned about joining because you're like, well, you talk about constipation a lot. Will this program work for me? And I was like, yes,
Yeah.
it will. I mean, yes, it will. Just update us. What are those symptoms like? When did they start improving?
Well, I was probably because of all the things that I had tried in the past, there were different things that I tried where I thought, this is it. I'm feeling a little bit better. If I just continue on, I will be okay. It will continue to get better. That never proved to be the case.
Mm,
So I was probably somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks into the program before I was convinced that it was actually the protocols that were working for me. Because, things resolve or get better on their own schedule. So, the abdominal cramping, the bloating, all that was different timing, the acid reflux. So it wasn't until they all started coming together and I was noticing, wow, they're all starting to decrease in severity that I was this program really works. And so I was real happy with that. But that my acid reflux is resolved now, using the protocols. I got that under. And by the way, I do want to mention visceral manipulation. I had trouble just sticking with the protocol. That didn't seem to be getting me over the hump. I was still having a little problem with the acid reflux. And it wasn't until I went for probably 2 visits for visceral manipulation, which, by the way, I was sure that wasn't going to work for me.
Don't
Um,
you love that?
yeah, I was certain it wouldn't work, but it did. And that's what really resolved it for me.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I can't say enough about visceral manipulation because that was really something that I was totally surprised by because, like I said, I was certain that there was nothing to that. It wasn't going to work.
Oh, I love hearing
Uh,
you say that. That is so common. That's so common that, and maybe it's not always visceral manipulation, but there's like some part in our process that someone's like, why are you having me do this? Like, this won't work. Or it could be the lab.
right.
Like, do I really, really, really need to do this lab? I'm like, yes, you do.
Absolutely. So, as far as the symptoms, the bloating is mostly resolved. The stomach cramps is greatly reduced.
Mm.
And instead of going from 24/7, I now maybe every other week I'll have a day where I'm a little crampy or something. It's not bad, but I'm not fully healed yet. I'm aware of that. This is a process. So, it's not disheartening to me. I'm still going to stay the course.
But yeah,
Um,
6 to 8 weeks in would have been February, March-ish of this year, because you would have started the program in January and maybe
right,
started your protocols in February-ish because
yes,
of the
yes,
labs. And then
correct.
6 to 8 weeks, I guess that would be like March or April. And it's now October. And those have sustained. Like, and you're not on all the same supplements, right? Like you're not on like
Correct.
the same gob of stuff that does happen. You're on a couple of them to maintain that healing course,
Right. That's
but
correct.
you've sustained, which is that's what counts.
Right. And the biggest win I would say for me has been the diarrhea. Um, I went from just constantly having loose stools to now actually have normal form stools, which surprises the heck out of me because it's been decades since I've had normal stools. So that's the biggest thing for me. So the urgency isn't there as much as it was, and I mean it's amazing. It's the transformation is amazing, and I can remember waking up one day and thinking to myself, is this how I'm supposed to feel? Because I was feeling
Aw.
good, and it's like I said, you go through and you adapt to these changes as they're happening, and you forget how what good health feels like. And it was amazing to me. I can remember thinking, is this how I'm supposed to feel?
Yeah. I actually have I just grabbed a bunch of clips of things you've shared um virtually, and I have a note here that you said on 3/11, on March 11th, you had the best day you've had in 5 years or more. And you were even kind of honest, like, it only lasted one day. And like, I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much, but like, I feel encouraged. And I was like, keep going.
Yes.
And now you have had
and
more of those best
and
days.
yes, things have been getting better and better. Yes.
Okay, so let's see. We've answered a bunch of great questions, what your top symptoms were, what they're like now. You haven't said this explicitly, but you did say your acid reflux improved. And just as a note, you got off your PPI, right?
Yes, and I had tried 3 or 4 times in the past to do that. I never could accomplish it. I'd always have to go back on within a couple of weeks because I would have trouble swallowing again, and I could feel it. And so I would go back on to the PPI again, omeprazole, and the swallowing issue would disappear again. So I didn't know that I always wanted to get off of it, but I could never find a way to do that. And
Yeah.
now I'm off of it,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I've been off of it for a few months now. So grateful. I'm very grateful.
It's so exciting, and it just feels like such a win on so many levels. I would love to now dig in a little bit. Let's kind of go back to when you were still thinking of joining and you were like checking out the podcast. You were sending me some messages with information on your health. And I would love for you to share, were you either scared or nervous or like to join or to work with us? and maybe those aren't even the right words, but I'm for that you would use. But yeah, maybe hesitant or cautious. Tell us more about that.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't scared at all.
Mm.
Um, After suffering for so long and trying to find answers, and I never could, um, I had nothing to lose. So I really wanted to try this because it was something that was so much different than my doctors had ever talked about, that I thought, if there's even a little bit of a hope and I could at least reduce my symptoms, maybe not resolve them, but reduce them, even that would be a win. So there was no fear for me giving this a try.
Yeah, if you don't mind me again quoting things, there are so many things that you've said that just felt they're so poignant in my mind, Dawn. But you shared that you said I have nothing to lose but money.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
I was like, no one wants to lose that. So
It depends upon how miserable you are, how
yeah.
miserable you feel. So
Yes. And again, maybe with one of the worst things that'll happen is we get used to feeling miserable. We're like, I know how to manage this. I work around
right.
it. You know. um, well, I'm really curious. You've mentioned several times that this really felt different, whether things I shared on the podcast or, once you were already in the program, I'm sure it continued to feel different. What were some of the things that felt different in our work together compared to what you had tried? What are like, can you remember specific details that
Sure,
stand out?
sure. There's some big differences. First and foremost is the testing. Um, I never had any kinds of testing from the GI doctors. It was just a colonoscopy, and one time I had an endoscopy. Um, like I said, they stretched my throat, but other than that, I had none of the extensive testing that you do in the program. The other thing is, in the program, you have so many videos that take the client through reading those lab results, those test results, on a step-by-step basis. And that was really helpful. I understood why I was having some of the issues that I was having based upon those results. Third, those protocols. The protocols, you have those set up to work for so many people. They've been proven to be successful, and they're written, they're detailed, and you give people a step-by-step process on how to follow them, almost like a blueprint, right? So
Oh, I love that, Don.
the other thing I would say then is that you use natural products rather than chemicals in these protocols. So I like that, and then you provided links to be able to get the necessary supplements or whatever was needed at a discount price. That was great. And then I think the other real advantage is having the group coaching calls and the Facebook group, where if you're confused by something or your symptom comes up and you don't understand what's happening, you have that support, to be able to ask the questions and get answers back. So all of that was so much better doing that than trying to call a doctor's office
I
and
know.
get an answer, you know. So yeah, it was huge differences between what I was used to and what I received through this program.
Oh, so exciting. Um, yeah, I'm just like letting that sink into my brain because I feel like that's our goal. That's our goal is provide what is not being provided. And it is different. Sometimes I think I'm actually really curious. You are somebody who went through our virtual group coaching program. And when you initially came to me, you said you were actually talking about my old offer that I had to work one to one with me. And I said, actually, I really don't think you need that. Everything you're describing, I think the Better Belly Blueprint would work perfectly for you and at a more accessible pricing. And you can just start it right away. There's like no wait list, etc. And you were a little like, are you sure? I'm not sure. And your main things that when I was looking, rereading stuff, it was like, I've heard you talk a lot about constipation, not, you know, not diarrhea. And once I kind of clarified that, you felt much better about the blueprint. But I'm curious, did you have any reservations even then, even when you joined? Like, I'm not gonna be getting this like kind of old school, like meet with a person on a call, one to one. Like, did you have any concern that that would be the reason that you might not get results, or was that kind of by the time you joined, not even like in the back of your mind?
No, that was in the back of my mind, but I
Yeah.
decided to go through with the blueprint itself rather than meeting directly with you. First of all, it was much cheaper.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
secondly, in listening to the podcast and listening to, people who had been involved with the program, I knew that people were seeing success. And I thought, well, that I can try that. I can at least try that and see how that goes. Surprisingly, with what has shown up on the test results, it all makes sense now, what I was going through. And yeah, this is something I can do myself. And that's another great thing about this program is that, you know, once you're in the program, you have structured this program so that these resources are available for life.
Yeah.
So, so if something crops up in the future, I know I can go back to the protocols and have that information and treat it, whatever it is, coming back up again. So
Yeah. And
that
that's
that
even
was really
happened to
good.
you once
It
already.
has. It
Yeah.
has.
You were kind of like, my acid reflux kind of rearing its head. I think it was acid reflux, right? Or was it
It was.
bloating?
No,
Bloating.
it was acid
Okay.
reflux.
Yeah. And you were like, kind of thought you knew what to do, and you just came in and gave a message. And I was like, no, no, okay, you stopped the stomach acid protocol. Go back to
Right.
that. And you're
Right.
like, oh, okay. And then you like message later, you're like, yeah, that helped. That's what I needed.
Yep. Yep. No, it was actually, you're right. It was the bloating because
Okay.
I was waking up with belly aches in the morning, and it
Yes.
was because of the low acid. I had stopped the low
Building.
stomach acid protocol,
Yeah.
and I didn't test before I went off of it, so that was my fault.
And that
So,
happens. That's like a small thing. That's not like the whole program didn't work and you're going to revert back. That's not like you it was just like it didn't quite click like, "Oh, I need to keep doing that." But right now it probably means how many supplements would you be on right now? Are you on 2? Are you like just that stomach acid protocol?
well, I am on the stomach acid protocol, the liver protocol,
Okay, that's a
and
nice one. Yeah.
yep, and so I'm not real
Yeah.
consistent, I
Oh,
guess would be the word. I'm not real consistent on the liver,
that's
uh,
okay.
wearing the castor oil pack. But I do it maybe, once or twice a week. So I'm not real
Yeah.
consistent.
But you don't
Um,
have to be, right? Your body's
right,
like, right.
right. Yeah, I'm doing fine without it. And sometimes I
Yes.
just go to bed and forget all about it. So
Yes. You're
I
just
guess if I
feeling
was in,
so good.
yes, if I was in misery, I would be more conscious of making sure I had that on for bed. But the um, the other thing that I'm on is uh, Candida, and
Oh yeah.
I went back on that Candida and C. diff
We
because I
decided to
just had
look
another test. I just had another test, and it showed that was again. So I went back on that. It's slightly modified from what the protocol was, but
exactly.
it's really helping a
Okay.
lot. So
Right. And we're
um,
kind of trying that out. And I remember thinking that there might be something because of how long you've had this Crohn's and just like giving your body a little bit more time to be able to self-regulate its own microbiome. So, yeah, I remember that you did that. But again, not a lot of people, like, it's not like everybody has to do that thing. And I think we're making an intentional choice with you, not like, you have to do this for life. It's just like, hey, let's do one more round of that and then go off and then see what happens. Are you in a better like
right.
self-maintaining state? But yeah, it's clearly not overwhelming or I don't know, annoying. You feel good.
Yes,
All right, Don, last question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
If you could share one thing to encourage a man or woman listening to this podcast right now regarding their health, what would it be?
I would say don't make the mistake of just simply treating your symptoms, at the expense of finding out what the root cause is. You know, you can't fix a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So do whatever the testing is that is required to find out what the root of the problem is, and then you can make an intelligent decision about how to begin treating it. And the other thing is, don't ignore the symptoms that your body's giving you, because as I found out, it can come back and cause worse problems later on. So, get after it, keep after it, but more importantly, find out what the root of the problem is and quit just treating symptoms, quit covering things up.
Yeah, and when people come into my program, even with you were on, I think you were on the PPI, and I feel like you were one of the people who asked, like, it's either like, do I have to come off the PPI right away or something like that? And I was like, actually, I don't want you are going to be miserable if you just jump off the PPI. Stay
Right.
on it until you get past a certain number of protocols. And then when we get to stomach acid building, that's when we'll start like doing like a swap of the PPI with the betaine HCl and zinc to like let your body start getting used to that. And then that worked. You were like super surprised that going off the PPI worked
Right.
later in the program. And so I will say, if someone is listening and they are using medications or supplements or diet or anything to manage symptoms, even if it doesn't feel like they have solved anything or like fixed anything, I'm always pro like live your best life, like get the symptoms managed because I don't want you miserable, but get to a place ideally where you don't need to be engaging in those rigorous diets or rigorous medications to just like barely live life. And that might feel harsh, but like, yeah, to like just get by, which is what I feel like is the heart of what you were saying. So, but just encouraging people, don't like just stop your PPI if that's
Right.
helping you.
Right.
Well, Don, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for just being brave as a human being and like looking for new things. It's even strikes me like that you have just a very young spirit. And I think that some people sometimes we get in we tell ourselves stories of I've just been sick for so long and all these methods people are trying, they're new and I'm getting confused. And you just didn't let that get in your way. You're like, I don't care how old I am. I don't care that this program is different. I'm going to find my solution. And you now have that. You actually have the results from that. And like, that's all you, even though you have sung my praises and I appreciate it. And we are definitely here to get people's resolution and solutions to their problems. You also are such a big part of your own healing and your own process in that. So just want to say it's been a blessing to have you in our program. And I'm just so excited to see what the next years have for you now that you can spend them in health with your grandchildren and your children. And so, which you didn't mention your grandchildren, but now you get to go and have vacations with them and you could be cool grandpa.
Yeah, well, as much as I can be, yes, I'll certainly do that. But yeah, it's made a difference. I mean, a lot of people, oftentimes you'll hear people say that, it changed my life. But I take a different approach. The Better Belly Blueprint is giving me my life back.
Hmm.
The life I used to have before all of this started going bad. So it's been a real blessing. And so thank you for using your talents to help people.
You're so welcome. Don, thanks again for coming on to the Better Belly podcast.
Have a good day.
Hey friend, I hope you loved this episode. If you've been a fan for a while or newly loving this podcast, can you do me a favor? Drop into Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. When you leave a review, you do so much. You help me know you're listening, you can tell me what you're loving so I know what to make more of, and you help others by boosting this podcast so other people like you can find the podcast too. I mean, it's a win-win-win, right? So if you want a way to pay it forward, just go to Apple Podcasts or click the link in my show notes and leave a rating and review. And if you want some more free stuff, just head over to my free Facebook group, betterbellytherapies.com/Facebook, and you can get access to all of my free support for you, including some Facebook group exclusive stuff like my podcast episode vault, where you can search the Better Belly podcast by topic and find exactly what you need to expedite your healing. I cannot wait to see you in there. Catch you guys next week.